Or
time you get started.
Episode 12? Okay. Episode 12 in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome, everyone, to the Covenant Table Podcast. My name's Steve. I'm one of the pastors here at Covenant Church. I'm excited about our guest today. Go around and introduce yourselves.
Well, I'm Josh Bundy, one of the pastors here at Covenant.
Hi, I'm Hillary's husband. Well, that's some people know me now. I'm Doug.
You're a beekeeping assistant.
I am a beekeeping assistant. As part of making the podcast more findable, like and subscribe.
Assistant to the apiarist.
Indeed.
We're going to talk about apiary. Doug is also, we get to serve on the elder board.
Correct.
And our fellow elders, which I'm really grateful for you. You keep the careful records.
I am the clerk, the stated clerk.
And you're a reader. You read cool stuff. You have a book by a medieval author that you brought in.
Josh and I are
as an extra treat.
monkeying around.
Yeah.
In fact, just a couple days ago was the 1,498th anniversary of his execution by the Romans.
Of whose martyrdom?
Boethius.
Boethius.
Wow.
We're throwing a party in 2 years if you'd like to come.
It's the 1500th. We've already put it on a calendar. We're ready to go.
The 1500th anniversary of his
Come to our
martyrdom.
Boethius martyrdom.
Will there be snacks?
Yes.
We actually need to do that.
It will be a feast.
He's
truly.
kind of an
It
amazing
needs to be a
author. We're going to get to our final precious guest. He's kind of an amazing author. And important figure because he's ancient and sort of medieval. He's on that bridge. So, so many things to talk about.
I don't read that stuff.
Nope.
Hillary, what do you do?
A lot of other things, but I don't read that stuff.
Hillary Wesney, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm Hillary, and I'm Doug's wife, and I am a beekeeper, otherwise known as an apiarist.
Apiarist.
I'm an
Yeah,
apiarist.
thank you,
I do
Google.
other things too, but
Hey, what are a couple of things that you love about keeping bees? And I'm curious about like what bees are doing now. It's the world's starting to freak out. It's getting cold.
well, so there are 3 bees. You have your queen bee, and every hive only has one queen. It's kind of like the mob. There can only be one.
Sure.
The workers are all female, and they are the ones, there's roughly 60,000 bees in one beehive, and I have 3. And the workers are the ones that do all the work. They're the girls. The boy bees are called drones. It's funny, my dad used to say, I'm just a drone. No, you're a worker bee, because all drones do is eat and help the virgin queen not be a virgin anymore. That's their job. So right now, the worker bees have kicked out all their brothers. So all the drones are out, and they will die because all they do is eat.
They don't have
procreate.
any food. Yeah.
They won't have food. And the reason why the workers kick them out is because they are now storing the honey for winter. Bees do not hibernate. What will happen is the bees will all cluster around the queen and keep her warm. So on those really, really cold days, they are still keeping that beehive around the queen 95 to 98 degrees.
Wow.
And those, of the 60,000, there'll be about 20 to 30,000 for the winter, because a normal worker bee's lifespan is 6 weeks. But right now, the queen is laying workers that will have extra fat on them so that they can stay warm, because there's less to forage now because we're going into winter.
Bees have fat.
It's kind of funny. These worker bees will have more fat on them. So then let's say...
And they'll last throughout the winter?
They will cluster around. So what they'll do is the ones closest to the queen are keeping her warm. And then you have all these layers of bees. So the ones on the outside are obviously the coldest. But then they'll rotate in and rotate out so that they all will make... Because it's all about keeping the hive alive. And they all have to work together. So while they're individual... I forget what my professor called it. They're individuals, but yet they work as one creature.
A lot of good symbolism there.
Oh my gosh. That's another reason why I love beekeeping, is it's just too crazy.
Like you can't make that stuff
you
up.
can't make it up. Every single cell, when you look at a honeycomb, every single cell that, what's the shape? The
Hexagon.
Yeah, whatever. I wasn't good at math. That shape is literally 3/8 of an inch. Every single one.
Exactly.
Now, for boy bees, it's a little bit bigger because they're bigger. And then for a queen, okay, so you want to hear something really cool? So Doug and I, you caught the swarm first. So in the spring, the queen will frequently feel like her house is too small. So she'll start sending out pheromones to the other workers. I'm going to get ready to leave. So you need to start making a new queen because a hive will die without a queen. So they start making a new queen. And the way you can tell that it's a queen is on the frame is where they make all the honey and everything. And on the bottom of the frame are called queen cups, and they look like peanut shells. And inside each one is a queen. And you can tell they're getting ready to swarm because these queens are on the bottom of the frame. And then what?
The multiple queens go? Or no, there's
No.
Oh, yeah.
Well, first, the queen that's there that made it through the winter, she's like, girls, love you, we're going. So she sends out that pheromone. They make many queens, but I'm going to get to that part. So then the queen leaves. It's like literally out of Winnie the Pooh. You see these
It's a cloud.
thousands and thousands of bees, and then they settle right around the queen anywhere between the top of a tree, a bush. This past spring, they were on top of our tree. And then all of a sudden you hear this buzzing noise and they just flew off. Well, Doug, avoiding a work call, followed the bee cloud, if you will, up the street to a tree. And he calls me, he goes, Hill, they swarmed. I got him. So I came home. He's such a great assistant. He had gotten a box. Now, normally I have a box all set up. He'd gotten a box, and you had gotten what, the cherry?
I took an old Home Depot pickle bucket and duct taped it to a giant, like one of those tree saws, the super long.
Sure.
I kind of put it up under there and just mashed it against the branch, and they all fell into the pickle
They fall
bucket.
in a clump.
And then lowered it all down.
How far did they have to fall?
They're probably about 10 to 12 feet up.
Yeah.
And I didn't, because if you want to buy a hive of bees,
Yeah.
$300,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
thereabouts. So if you can catch them,
It's not nothing.
free money.
Yeah, yeah.
No, this
And
isn't cheap.
they're your bees too.
Do you have gear on?
Yes,
Yeah, you have
I do
protective gear.
I had protective gear on, and it was really
Were you wearing
fun.
your suit or just your jacket?
Just my jacket. And it was really fun talking to neighbors because they were freaked out because there's this just
Yeah.
cloud of bees going up the street, and they end up landing. And I'm talking, explaining. People are taking video, and so anyway, I get them in there. If you catch the queen, you will get everyone else.
Right.
So if you've got the queen, they'll follow her. So I dumped it into the box, and they all just march into the box. Close the lid.
You asked
take it
me to
home.
come take it home, so I took it home and
Yeah, she pulled up in the car.
I put it outside the garage. Well, they swarmed again. They
Well,
left the box.
We didn't close one door, so they all
They left again, but this time they went right on our mailbox.
right out front of our
It
house.
was so awesome.
That's where you want them.
Oh, yeah. So I put on my bee suit and I put them in, and then I'm the beekeeper for Mark and Fran Fisher, and their bees didn't make it through last winter. So I called them up and I said, hey, I'm bringing over bees.
I got some bees.
I got some bees. And so we did that. So what happens then with those queens that are left, the first one born will go and sting all the rest and kill the rest because there can only be one queen.
Wow.
And so she's a virgin. And I was a midwife to a queen bee this past spring, and I videotaped it. And it was so cool because when she emerges, she sends out this really loud piping noise to let everybody know.
Which you can hear with
can
human.
hear it.
It's like a buzz. It's a frequency. It's like a loud.
That's high-pitched noise. Yeah. And then what that also communicates is if there's another virgin queen there, they're sending that out.
They're gonna fight.
Basically saying, okay, this is the sharks and the jets, and we're meeting in the middle, and we're going to rumble, and it's to the death.
Wow.
Literally.
And then after she's around a little bit, then she goes off and flies about 5 miles away so that
Other drones.
drones.
Yeah, drones don't impregnate their own hive. They'll service other hives.
Yes.
Got to keep this clean.
I know. It's like, how do I say
Correct.
this?
Interesting.
And then she will come back and she can lay up to 3,000 eggs a day for the next 2 to 5 years.
Wow.
And
That's incredible.
It
How
is
much?
wild.
So much of our food, so much. If I'm trying to remember the stat, if bees didn't do their thing, basically, like the world doesn't work.
We will
Correct.
do our thing.
There's not
Correct.
food.
Right.
Trees don't grow.
Right.
No flowers.
Pollination is a
Right.
critical part of
Yeah.
flowering, fruiting
Yeah.
plants.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating.
So yeah, that's just a little snippet.
A nugget.
So right
little
now they're
snippet.
getting ready for winter. I have not taken any of their honey since August because they need it for winter. They will feed the queen. The workers will feed the queen.
So you're just letting them have that honey. Mm-hmm. And about 20,000 will hover around the queen, and 40,000 worker bees just die. And
They
they're
will
not
they will
needed 'cause they're
eventually
not-
die off, and then come February, March, they will do, it's called a cleansing flight. Bees are very clean. So they'll go out and they have to go to the bathroom because they don't go to the bathroom in the hive. So they'll go out, but since they've flown, they've then therefore used their fat resources. And again, a normal worker's lifespan is 6 weeks. So once they've used their fat sources, they only have a few weeks left to live. But at that point, the queen is already laying eggs. So by the time those bees emerge, it starts all over again.
Wow.
And it's just really cool because as you were talking about what's your gift, when a bee, every skill that a bee does in the hive is vitally important, and the hive will not survive. And there is no job that's more important than the other. So as soon as that worker emerges, she cleans out her cell so that a queen can go and lay another egg. Then you become a nurse bee. At one point, you're a guard. At one point, you're an undertaker. At one point, you're a scavenger. At one point, you're a forager. There's just all these different jobs, and every single job is important. And every bee actually ends up doing each job. Their last job is foraging.
In those 45 days, 7 different jobs they
Wow.
cycle through.
They cycle through. There's a sermon illustration in there somewhere.
Oh, there's
yeah.
a lot of.
Or 10.
There's so many.
If you need
I'm thinking about
photos, I
this.
got photos and videos.
One body, we have many members, and members do not all have the same function.
Right.
It's something that the Apostle Paul loves to say. Hey,
Yeah.
we're part of one thing, but we don't all have the same job and role.
We're all one thing, and yet we're all different. And yet we're all one. Like, what?
Yeah,
What's going
we're all
on
one.
here?
Yeah. There's a healthy tension there, and we're going to talk about spiritual gifts next week. Someone wrote in a question about the gift of prophecy. What is it? Does it still operate today? That's actually in the passage this coming week. In Romans 12, there's a list of spiritual gifts, and we're called all to use our spiritual gifts. Prophecy is one of those gifts. We're going to talk about that next week. So that'll be exciting. Look forward to that. That's the sermon this coming week. But hey, I wanted to talk about this for a second. Where do you like to sit during worship, the worship gathering on Sunday, and why do you like to sit there?
Well,
Probably most people know we've got a regular spot. I think
You've
most
got-
people, when you look around,
Hey, on the
people
roller
have a
coaster, there's
regular
front
spot.
rows people,
yeah,
hands in
our
the air.
pew name is the first 2 seats in the front row.
Correct. You guys like the front row.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why do you guys like the front row?
I think I picked it. Did I?
It goes way back.
back.
When the kids were little, when we first started going to Valley Bible Church in Haddam, Connecticut, the kids were real little, and they all went to the front row. So that's where but I think
A lot of it
tell
is.
why you like the front row.
I get distracted a few times. We've sat in the back, and as people are coming in, I am all about saying hello and hugging and not paying attention. And then if I'm sitting there and I'm trying to even listen to the music
So
or
you're like the kid who's bad in class that the teacher puts in the front row.
that was me.
And that way they can't interrupt
Seriously,
anymore.
it's true. That was
Doug
me.
thought that was funny.
Because we didn't
Because
know
it
each
was
other in
true.
That would have happened to me in school.
but
How do I know that? How do I remember that?
that was me.
Squirmiest kid, go up front.
That's right.
No, but that's interesting. For the sake of your own focus, you found that that's helpful
Yes.
to just be in the front, and that way you're not distracted by other people coming in.
Yes.
Do you do that when you go to other churches?
Yes.
So, like you're visiting a church on vacation or something, you'll sit in the front.
Or the second row. I might sit in the second row because I don't know if I'm taking somebody's seat in the front row.
Got you.
Because when somebody has a few people have sat in our seat, and it's really hard to not be like, excuse me, move over. That's mine.
Right.
We could go back to that old idea of having names on rows like the old pews in the 1700s.
Right.
This is the Wesney's box.
Reserved.
was like
We're
with
going to have
keys.
reserved on it.
With keys, you rented your pew. This happened in America in churches. You would rent a pew.
Really?
And it was bad. It was a bad idea because wealthier people would have the best seats.
Right.
I think there's a Bible verse about that. The Corinthians were told explicitly not to do that, and somehow folks got around that. Where do you like to sit in your?
All over the place.
Yeah.
Left, right, front, back. I probably default to the front more than the back, but
Do you intentionally move around? Like
yeah.
and
I
Jenna,
move
like-
around and sit next to different people.
Is that
If I'm sitting with Jenna, we typically will sit close to people that we both know, like small group friends or something. When I'm in a service by myself, which as a pastor in churches that always have 2 or more services on a weekend, I'm always in some services by myself. Then I'll just move around and sit with different people, sit next to people.
And is that kind of a pastor hat thing, or you do that?
No, that's me. That's just, I like to talk to different people. I like to give people a fist bump, say hi, check in.
Yeah.
So I'll move around. Like to see things from different angle. See if Steve preaches the same from the left side of the room as the right side of the room.
It's completely different.
That kind of thing. Yeah. It's completely different.
My wife likes to sit towards the front also to remove distraction. But typically, I find when I visit a place, I like to sit towards the back and just kind of take it in. It's interesting. And the different motivations for that.
Sure.
Some people are like, hey, I just kind of want to, you think about how weird it would be to show up at a worship gathering unfamiliar with that. And it's part of the process of investigating Christianity. You show up on a Sunday, like, what's happening here? And it's a way to kind of observe it all and take it all in. You know?
Right.
Sometimes I think that, I want to thank people who are showing up. Hey, I'm going to investigate this, and just recognize how big of a step that is.
Right.
It's a big deal.
Hey, at least you're here. Glad you're here.
Yeah, exactly. So we should talk about stewardship.
Yeah, let's talk about it. Also, we should ask Hillary one question about how many half marathons she's ran.
I am about to run half marathon number 15.
Number 15.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's cool.
Yeah.
It'll be my 15th half.
That's cool.
My 15 years.
Wait a second. You didn't.
How many years?
15.
Wow.
I've run 5. It'll be my 5th one this year.
Wow.
My 6th one in a 12-year span.
Nice.
I'm surprised you didn't default to ask me how many half marathons I've run.
Doug, how many half marathons have
Exactly
you ran?
0.
We're going to ask you about how many C.S. Lewis books you have and which
Now
editions.
there we go.
Before the show is over.
26.2. I believe.
26.
That he
There you
didn't
go.
ask you. I was offended. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I was offended for you.
Thank you. Actually, we've got
Stewardship.
She's got magnets on her car. 13.1, 26.2. She got me a magnet in the back of my car. It says 0.0.
There
I
you
don't
go.
run.
I don't run. Amen.
All right,
I'm
speaking of
proudly
stewardship.
married to a non-runner. I was telling you a story before. My daughter, she says that I look so bad when I run that she's like, Dad, it just looks so awful when you run. Please don't ever do it near my school. She said that when I was in junior high. I would park blocks away and then kind of jog up to the school.
Is it a Forrest Gump thing?
I guess.
I've seen
It just
many
looks
weird
bad.
runners. I
and
can't
she was
imagine.
like, Dad, it just looks so bad. You're going to become a meme. Just never imagine a
was kind of
10-block
her.
radius around my school.
She was
never
looking out
run
for
in
you.
that zone. That's a no-run zone. It was amazing.
That's
it was just
actually
terrifying.
awesome.
It was just terrifying. She's like, I looked out the window. I saw you jogging. Never do that.
It was a kindness she did you, I guess.
She did.
She's like, I don't want my dad to be a
She's
meme.
looking out for you.
It was a public
Director of
service.
Liberty Network, pastor of Covenant Church now.
Chronic
Meme.
bad runner.
Dad meme.
Is that running, man? Yeah.
A dad meme. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So, hey, we have a theme verse for this next group of 5 sermons, and it's from 1 Peter 4. As each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as good stewards of God's varied grace. Whoever speaks is one who speaks oracles of God. Whoever serves as the one who serves by the strength that God supplies, in order that in everything God may be glorified through Jesus Christ. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So we're just calling the series Steward. And the definition of a steward is managing something, being in control of something that you don't own, administering something that isn't yours. And so in the ancient world, there were stewards of households. That was like an organizing unit. You probably know more about that than I do, since you're
Well,
getting
it was a really important position. There's a word for it. Oikos is the word for house. Nomos is like a ruler, or, the law. Oikonomos is this compound word that they use for the ruler of the house or the master of the house. And it's the steward. So his job is to give things to people at the appropriate times, like pay, food, clothing, allotments. If a home, people are supposed to get a certain amount of food rations or something like that. It's all the master's stuff. The steward makes sure everybody gets what they deserve, and that they don't take more than that they are supposed to take.
They're a manager of something.
Mm-hmm.
And oikonomos, everybody knows that word today. You don't know that you know it.
Tell us, Doug, what is it?
Economics.
Oh,
That's
an economist.
Economics is oikonomos. It's the law of the house.
That's cool.
You know
I like
it.
that.
There.
You know it. You just didn't know it.
There you go.
And he's not on Jeopardy. I don't know why.
I have a great short story about this, and it's going to keep my Robin Hood and his merry men streak alive for the second week in a row.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's
I like that you have a
one of the
Phillies hat.
tales. One of the great tales in the Robin Hood collection is Little John, right-hand man of Robin Hood, goes to Nottingham and wins some feats of strength and some archery contests at the fair, and the sheriff doesn't recognize him, so he hires him to work in his house. And all winter he lives there, and he gets fat and lazy and gets to go hunting with the sheriff and everything. But he gets so fat and lazy that he starts sleeping in and skipping work. And one day he skips breakfast, and he goes downstairs in the middle of the day, and he wants breakfast. And the steward with the big ring of keys is like, "No way. Like, you didn't come at the right time. Forget it. Come back tomorrow." And so Little John takes the keys and bonks him on the head, knocks him out, breaks into the pantry and starts eating the food. So the cook comes running with a sword and is like, "Can't take the master's stuff. You knocked the steward out. What are you doing?" And Little John's like, "Well, if we're going to fight to the death with swords, shouldn't we at least drink some of this good wine and eat this good meat pie first and sing some songs?" And so they have a roaring party. And then they have a sword battle to a draw. And then they just run off, and Little John's like, "Why don't you just come live with us in the woods?" And they steal all the silver from the sheriff of Nottingham. He takes his cook, and they run off to the woods, and they rejoin Robin Hood. That's my story.
And it involves a steward.
And it involves a steward. It's connected, and it counts.
So what you're saying is, when I go into a diner at 10:45 and they stop serving breakfast at 10:30,
that's right.
I should whip a sword out and fight to the death?
No, you have a party first.
You have a party.
Okay.
The point is to
Forgot
have
the
a party.
party.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a position in a house, really important position.
Correct.
And it's kind of an honor, actually, that Paul would say to early Christian people that in God's house, each of you has a stewardship position, because many of these people in their regular life, they were actually very low class workers, or they might have been slaves. To be the steward of a house is a very prestigious, important position, and it's an honor. So to us, when we hear like God's made us a steward of the graces of God, we might be like, so he has work for me to do? Like, what? But for them, man, what an honor to hear that. Like, God esteems you, he gives you a position. Yeah.
That's helpful. It'd be helpful to point that out next Sunday, because we don't hear that as a position of honor. And he says everyone is a steward of God's varied grace. So God has given us gifts, varied. That was my Greek geek moment this past Sunday in the sermon. The Greek geek moment was varied is used for multicolored, but he chooses a word that means, hey, there's all different kinds of gifts. All different kinds of gifts, things that we've been given, we have control over. Now use that to serve one another in love, which is the point. Serve one another. as a good steward. And then the two big categories, whoever speaks is one who speaks oracles of God. Whoever serves is one who serves by the strength God supplies.
What's an oracle?
Just a message from God.
A message from God.
Yeah. A revelation.
Is it more formal than like just God's words or revelation?
That's a good question, because it's not a word that's used frequently at all. But it typically means like a message from God.
Logia.
Logia. Yeah, I see that.
I'm cheating. I'm using my Bible app.
And logia is what's translated?
Yeah.
Yeah, saying or
A
oracle.
response or message given by an oracle.
I think maybe that underlines.
An utterance made or received. Here's biblical definition of oracle. An utterance made or received as authoritative, extremely wise.
So then when the angels would come, let's say when Gabriel came, was that an oracle that he gave?
Yeah, that's probably the
It's
idea.
a message.
I think it underscores the importance of this again. I'm looking at this through the lens of honor and shame, of dignity. You know, for some householders, to be called a steward is actually a reminder that you're not all that. In God's house, everybody is also distributing God's good gifts to the people. You're not in charge of everything. But to most of the people, it is an honor. It's like a promotion. And then to be speaking the words of God means that even if everybody in town ignores you and your master ignores you and your family, or whatever, like never has thought of you as a great speaker, it's like you're speaking something important.
Your words are important. There's encouragement in being called a steward. There's also a call.
Yeah, a
Hey.
sobriety. Take it serious.
Step up. And he does elevate. He elevates like the common speech we have. Like I think I wonder if the people of Covenant get that, like in our community groups or the Bible studies, the words and wisdom that we share, the prayers for each other, all those words that we give each other, words of exhortation, if we feel the weight of it, the importance of it, that God places upon it, he really elevates the dignity of those words. And he says that we need them. We need each other's words and wisdom.
Well, and that's one of the things I think I've had to learn really hard over the years. And you and I, Hillary, if you've got all the theological knowledge and the biblical knowledge and all the multi-syllable words, those are the important words, and the simple and the mundane and the basic, those aren't as important. And I think that may be in part two. So that's something we've had to work on for a long time over the years is me having that understanding that not everything is necessarily academic and propositional and all these fancy things before we started here in the recording, you were talking about, what's the famous Winnie the Pooh phrase you love to say?
I like short, easy words like "How about lunch?" and "Help yourself, Pooh."
How about lunch?
And so there's a place, that's what's cool. We were talking about, the whole, how are we one? And yet, that we do have, like the bees, we have various gifts and jobs and responsibilities. And it was always easy for me as the smart academic guy to want to look down and think, well, because I've got all this special knowledge, I'm so much smarter. When in fact, I'm not.
Yeah, we need each other. What was the Spider-Man thing? With great power comes great responsibility. So I'm thinking that was like the theme of the Spider-Man movies.
Yeah.
Hey, you've been
That's
given
his
these
famous
gifts.
line.
Yeah. With great power comes great responsibility, which is a biblical thing. To whom much is given, much is required. But it connects with, Dave Pallison, biblical counselor from the Philadelphia area, died just a number of years ago now. But he also tried to elevate that, just the words that we share as human beings. That was that quote that I shared this past Sunday. Few people define themselves as counselors, but all of us counsel. Counsel others all the time. Every time you open your mouth, however seemingly trivial the topic, you either counsel well or poorly. The things you say are either wise or foolish. Your words offer either nourishing food or empty calories or poison. And
I wrote that part down. I thought that was really cool.
In your sermon notes from Sunday, yeah.
I remember writing it down.
What's crazy is that we usually don't know what really hurts somebody or really is healing to somebody. We probably usually don't ever learn that. They don't tell us. Sometimes we learn like much later, and and somebody will say, well, this thing you said to me 3 years ago has stuck with me. And you're
That
like,
really
wow,
helped me.
like I didn't realize that was important to you or hurt you. The word. So there is something about like what we say to each other is changing futures. It's changing people's destinies, and like nobody can live with that all the time. Like you can't live with everything you say has to be that serious, but there's probably a Christian journey of maturity where you learn that over time. You learn to take your words more seriously. You learn to be bold and speak up at certain times. You learn to put certain things away and not say them.
yeah.
And all of us have to do that and learn that even more,
Yeah, that's good.
I'm convinced that a lot of times that stuff was shielded from me because otherwise I would have had a bigger and fatter head than I already had.
What do you mean?
Meaning like that I've had, because you and I know, like Jason, like people who for me, it felt like a throwaway comment, a good thing, not a cutting thing, but just, hey,
You shared something off the cuff.
yeah, something off the cuff, not something I'd planned on. I've got this great plan, but I have this conversation and someone coming back years later and going, hey, that one moment, you said that one thing, and I completely pivoted from that point. And I'm like, I'm glad, so my
That was
point
with
being,
Young
I'm
Life
glad I
Kids,
didn't
yeah.
know
Yeah.
at the time because I would have been even more insufferably arrogant. So it's a mercy from God. In one of I'll try and contain myself, but C.S. Lewis's one of those great visions that he talks about at the end of time is at the end. So he talks about this. I think it's in Paralandra at the end of one of the Space Trilogy books, and this whole idea of both singing and dancing and celebration, and part of it is a revelation where God now allows us to see that little comment that you thought was nothing was something that God used as a massive lever to make a whole difference in someone's life. And part of what we experience then in eternity is hearing how God masterfully worked everything together. And these comments, these encouragements, that little note, that text message that you thought was nothing, like brought someone from the precipice back.
Yeah.
And then to reveal in glory. And that's, kind of holy, holy, holy becomes the super ultra most condensed version of how that will all get spelled out, and you have the time and opportunity, because I'll still be limited in heaven, but then I'll get to meet that person, the great grandson of someone who, I, as a Young Life leader, spoke, oh yeah, I want to follow Jesus. And their great grandson can say, hey, I can't wait to tell you how.
That's a spiritual grandchild.
Yeah.
You lead someone to the Lord, then they lead someone to
Yeah.
the Lord. And God used that.
Yeah.
And there was a little window there God opened up. Hey,
And we get to participate with him in that. Like that's where the whole stewardship thing becomes like two words that have been really sticking with me lately are gravity and levity. Gravity, heavy weight, substance, but levity, light, airy. That if I carry a sense of gravity everywhere, people kind of can feel overwhelmed. And that God uses both of those things in tension, the joy and laughter, because you talked about that on Sunday, that these things are all gifts. And it's a wonderful way to be encouraged and built up.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do we need a load lightened? Like, I don't need more gravity right now. I'm buried in burdens.
Right.
I could use some levity, and not the crass, silly stuff like you see on TV, but just a genuine, there's a lightness here.
Yeah.
This is relief.
We can trust God. We don't have to take ourselves so seriously.
Right.
That's helpful. That helps us laugh at ourselves. We can laugh at where we like to sit. We can laugh at, just laugh at things that we would be, if our self-identity or self-understanding was based on our performance or what we have to achieve, we'd just be tense.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, that's good. What do we need to try to reinforce for like the community life of Covenant? I think that here's what I think happens. I think like people think like, okay, community groups, they're there. Do I need that? Would that help me? Instead of from the angle of, hey, what could I offer to a community group, a Bible study? So, there's the challenge, hey, you need the words and wisdom and prayers of other Christians in your life. Also, if you're not in that rhythm, you're withholding your presence, the gift of your presence, your words and wisdom from other people. You're withholding gifts. So think about that. And I don't know. I hope there's more people that join our community groups out of this. Like, hey, I have gifts to offer. What am I doing with
There's
them?
no substitute for time with people. You can't make it up. You just don't love people as much if you haven't spent time with them. It just isn't possible. It's not the way humans work. So anybody who spent like a week in their childhood at some kind of a camp that they enjoyed, if it wasn't like terrifying and awful, but they made friends, the way you feel about people after spending a week with them or a road trip with some good friends or something like that. And this happens to college students all the time. Mm-hmm. It's one of the peak seasons of life where you make the most acquaintances and the most friendships in a concentrated period of time. And you have a little bit of money and you have some time. So you go do things together. You spend time together. You make memories. You laugh about stuff.
You have a ton of time together.
Ton of time together. And what happens is then those people end up in your wedding. Those people do like, hey, we've vacationed together now for 20 years. We get together once every year. Things like that. And why does that happen? Well, because of time. Through life, like studies show that people have less and less friends in every decade, unless they intentionally make friendships in each decade of life. Naturally, you'll lose them because you don't ever have as much time again. You end up in things like careers, families,
things like jobs
becomes your only
get
friends.
in the way.
Yeah. Things like jobs get in the way. And also, this is sad, but like through time, friendships dissolve through fighting, or people die. People get sick and die. So the older you get, you're actually losing friendships. You really have to have time with people. There's no substitute for that, to have connection and relationships. And so, churches recognize that and realize that worship service is not producing those kind of friendships.
Yeah.
You get great teaching, you get great music, but you can be so lonely. And small groups are one of the church's attempts to do something about that. Mm-hmm. But honestly, like 9 times a year doesn't really do anything. Right. Like nine times together with your friends a year, or 11 really doesn't produce much. So this isn't church studies. This is like secular studies show that people need like 30 to 52 FaceTimes, like face present with each other a year, for it to be transformative, like to change the way their life direction goes, the way they make decisions. And that's whether it's a small group work team or community activity.
Really?
Yeah. So 30 to 52 sounds like an immense amount of time together, but also like that's just because that's where relationship, it's like it becomes a weekly or every other weekly rhythm all the time. So this is a hard conversation, but yeah. People.
I've seen articles about that, especially men are in middle age lonely.
Yeah.
Sure.
Working all the time.
Super.
Have you ever seen the different postures when women hang out and when men hang out? When women hang out, they're like, hey, our bodies are facing together. They're like almost like knee to knee, giving each other full attention. And sometimes men are more comfortable shoulder to shoulder. So it's like fishing, or some activity, and that draws out heart and soul in the context of that. But there is another dynamic with career and the transient nature too of American society, if you move to a different place, you have to start over. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of time to get to know folks.
Lived that one. We moved
Same.
from Arkansas. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Wesley's
hard.
moved here a number of years
Connecticut.
ago from Connecticut.
Give me some insights as a guy who just moved to a place and is making new friends.
I think that it's probably going to be harder for you and Christine because your kids are older now. I think it's easy, in my opinion, in my experience. We moved here when our kids, 3 weeks before school, Pete was going into 10th, Betty was going into 7th, Becca going into 5th. Kind of at that age where when the kids were younger, you're friends with your kids' friends' parents. Mm-hmm. So you kind of have built-in friends. So we moved here and everybody already has built-in relationships, but they were still young enough that we were able to get connected because we still had kids in school, so there was some familiarity there. I know friends of ours who've just recently moved away, they had a hard time moving here because their kids were grown up. And so you don't have
There's
that
not
kind
that
of thing.
natural.
There isn't. I'm sure it's probably hard for single folks
Yeah.
to make friendships because it's just harder, especially in this area. So I think that, how do I say this? I'm just going to say it because I can be Winnie
Just say
the Pooh. Sometimes the person who wants to make the friend might have to step out of their comfort zone and go to the next step counter or something like that where they can meet at least one person. That's why I was so grateful when we first came here that person in front of me turned around and hugged me and let me cry on her shoulder. And she made that step so that then I could call her and make a step because you can't just sit back and wait either.
Mm-hmm. So when you first showed up in this area at this church, there was someone who reached out to you. Hey,
Yeah,
you're
after
new.
church.
How are you?
Yeah, the
How are you?
pastor had said, hey, at the end of the service, he said, hey, why don't you find somebody you don't know and invite them to the cafe? So she turned around and I'd been singing. I was so grateful. We'd been singing all the songs that I knew. She said, was that you singing so sweetly in my ear? And I just burst into tears. Yes. And she introduced us. He remembers. Because I did not want to be here.
What were you carrying in your heart? Hey, I don't like this area.
I don't like it here. I don't like it. We lived a mile away from my folks and an hour from his folks. I didn't want to move. I'd never not lived in Connecticut my entire life. I left everything I knew. I had not one single friend. He had started working here months prior, so at least he had people he knew. Mm-hmm. And you had visited Covenant a couple of times, right?
Just once or twice.
So twice is two, couple. Mm-hmm. So it was
that kind of magic marital dialogue. That's why it's great to have a husband.
well, and then,
Welcome to the world of Doug and Hillary.
This is an ancient debate. Couple could be two
No,
or
it's
more.
two.
But
That's few.
couple is
Few
two.
or more.
Otherwise, we say
Few
more
is
than
3 or more.
Yeah,
Couple
thank
is
you. So and
Brace.
we had no furniture yet. It was just I did not like. I knew that we were supposed to be here, but I was not happy with God or the situation, and I left all my everything.
So you're in church just carrying that.
Yeah.
And someone reached out, and that's actually the weight of that, the sadness of that.
It
came out.
did, and she introduced me to other people, which is why the first time I was a hostess, I encouraged people to find somebody you don't know and invite them to the cafe. Strike up a conversation because you may be that very person, their very first friend here. And, we were created to be in relationship with people, and it's just the older you get, the harder it is to make friends.
Can I say something?
It probably means we have to exercise more effort.
Mm-hmm.
We have to try harder.
Absolutely.
When later it was earlier it was easier, and now we have to be more intentional. What were you going to say?
I want to say something to middle-aged men. I want to say something to young dads. Okay.
Cool.
Young dads first is if you don't have a bunch of friends, or your wife is struggling with friendships, you're new to this church or you're new to this area, make an effort to let your wife get away with some other women for a weekend. Not a couple hours, but a weekend. Go to the beach, the shore, or the Poconos or something. Let them go get a cabin or whatever and hang out. it makes such a difference. Yes, you have to like suck it up and feed the kids and do all this stuff for like a couple days and like so, but it can be fun, you know, if you try to make it fun. But like, yes, it'll be a lot. But like the rewards that come from your wife having good friends are immense. Mm-hmm. You know, like just less loads to carry emotionally at home when the spouses both have good friends. Like you process some things with friends and come to your spouse with them already partly worked out. It's a huge benefit.
It's true for wives need to know that too about their husbands.
Yeah.
If the only person you're sharing your heart with or your deepest thoughts or your wife, your relational world is actually impoverished. Mm-hmm. It's actually, you'll have a healthier marriage if your husband has like heart friends.
Right.
There's a Celtic word for this. Maybe Doug will know.
Doug will know it.
Soul friend. I forget what it is. It just means soul.
You stumped me.
I don't know. But part of Celtic Christianity.
Let's have a contest to name that.
We need like soul friends. So just think about that in terms of like male loneliness. A lot of guys just don't have people they talk about their heart with.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's just not healthy.
Do guys just not go deep that way?
Sometimes.
We don't like to be stereotyped like that.
Well, no, you don't like to be stereotyped like that, but are you stereotyped like that because you're like that?
It's some of it's probably that.
Some of it, yeah.
There's a lot of things. There's probably things culturally, time-wise. Americans work more, have more unused. We lead the world in unused vacation days. Mm-hmm. We need to quit winning that race.
That's not a badge of honor.
That's not a badge of honor. That's weird.
That's like leaving part of your paycheck and just saying, I don't want it.
Yeah.
Correct.
But yeah, who doesn't love, though, the rugged individual, like, you know, tough guy goes all the way to the end. That's what, that's that, yeah. Rah,
the deformed idea, messed up ideas about what masculinity is. So it goes back to that. There is weird ideas of what it is to be a man.
Gary Cooper, the middle of the street.
There is a guy, I talked to an older brother in Christ after Sunday service who has an ill family member, and people have been reaching out to him and his wife, walking with them, praying for them, and he was like, it's humbling to receive that. Mm-hmm. It's humbling to let people carry a burden, to be real. We're like, what was one of the cool things about the story you told, you were actually honest. You're like, hey, it's hard to be there. Mm-hmm. I'm not singing Zip-Dee Doo-Dah every day because I'm here in Bucks County. You're like, I miss Connecticut.
In front of people, but it was just, couldn't hold it back.
Yeah. It's humbling to actually, and there's some gospel in that, right? Mm-hmm. If we understand the gospel, we'll actually let our burdens be carried once in a while. That's part of community life. Part of like being friends.
Yeah, this is a solid tip though. I started it. You kind of took it a little further, and it could go for both husband and wife. Like, give each other the gift for Christmas or your next birthday of like, hey, you get 2 nights to go do something with friends. Hey, you get 2 nights to go do something. Last year, my wife gave me as a gift, take 2 nights to go solo camping. Now that wasn't with friends. My need at that time was I needed a little bit of alone time.
Yeah, but
it was just a huge gift. She was willing to we planned it. She was willing to do all the parenting for 2 days. I got to go away and go camp. It was huge, you know. Do that for each other.
I bet too. This is a shout out to community groups or like, hey, the elders. We had an overnight in August, just because like, hey, probably the relational time is worth like 5 months of elders meetings. You know, 6 months. Sure. It's like a head start. I learned that Bruce McMorty was almost hit by a car driven by Mr. Rogers.
For real?
I needed to know
Fred
that.
Rogers?
Mr. Rogers on the TV show.
Yeah.
Almost hit Bruce McMorty in a car. How could I live and not know that? I needed to know that.
And it's how I stole Doug's copy of Boethius.
That's true, too.
Yeah. So
it was an awesome moment. Like Doug was like, hey, I've got this copy of Boethius. And I thought it was, I've got this copy of Boethius for you.
For you.
And I accepted it.
I've done that for him, too.
And Doug goes, well, Yeah, keep it.
That's hilarious. I did that to Doug too. He showed me a book one time and I was like, I thought he was giving it to me. And I was like, oh no, he's not giving it to me. He's just excited about it.
Doug, you just need to start buying like 3 copies of books.
We both have
I've done
like
that.
pastor thievery when it comes to books. We're excited about books.
We let Doug be a steward of books, of God's books.
Doug is a good steward
Well,
of books.
the famous line is, "You never lend out a book you don't care to get back."
Well, that's
So
why you buy
always-
many copies,
Yeah, I
especially if
do-
you're C.S.
so
Lewis
I've learned,
books.
I've learned to buy used books because it
Yeah.
becomes affordable. But I love giving them away.
I love giving away books too and buying multiple copies of it.
Yeah.
Middle-aged men tip.
So, hey, we
Middle-aged
got to
men
let
tip.
people in.
Yeah.
It's time away together, extended time. There's something that happens different there.
Yeah, for guys
too.
in particular, that one, because it takes time to warm up and loosen up. And, it's hard to do that over a coffee or a breakfast or a beer or whatever. Just, it's hard to, I want to be on guard and I want to be careful. And, in verse 9 there, 1 Peter 4, that show hospitality to one another without grumbling. A lot of times I've got to be aware, like Hillary and you and I have been talking about, we need to do, so even though we're in a weird season of life where, gosh, we're going to be empty nesters and mom's going to move in. All right, mom. And I love my mother-in-law. And,
I love my mother-in-law too.
Yeah.
But she doesn't live with us.
But right. But again, you get in these places and you're like, well, I don't want to impose on mom, so we're just not gonna have folks over, and that'll just make it awkward. And finally this year, we're like, we gotta stop that. Because it will be good for us, it'll be good for mom. Is it awkward and strange in a manner of speaking, perhaps? But it's a little bit on what you're talking about small groups, but hey, your line, then that was what hit us, is we're withholding stuff because either we're uncomfortable or we're tired. So we're just not going to do this.
Yeah.
But you're right. We're withholding opportunities from others, and we're missing out on opportunities to be able to be with folks who we can build relationships with, or who we can get to know, and hearing one another's stories. Again, over meals is a fantastic way to be able to create openness. I mean, holy moly, the whole point of communion is shared community, and
Around
again,
a
a
meal.
recognition of I'm an individual, and yet I'm part of something way bigger.
That's good. We're actually going to do a series in the spring. It's going to be called Meals with Jesus. Luke, there's all these scenes around meals and the hospitality. Jesus actually gets in trouble for his hospitality. Every time the Pharisees are basically like, every time we see Jesus, he has a plate of wings in one hand, and look at who he's hanging out with.
He didn't even wash his hands right. What's the matter with this guy?
Exactly. But the
Party animal.
table fellowship, and there's actually going to be a challenge to the church, an invitation to the church. Could we reorganize our life around the call of the gospel, the mission of Jesus, and do table fellowship with each other? Could we intentionally try to do that more as a church community?
Well, look
It
at
could
what
change the game.
Look at because not just certainly for our church community, but also for those who are outside of our community. I mean, we look at just the massive rise in anxiety and the division and the frustration and the loneliness that is just consuming people.
Yeah.
And how do I break out other than, like, I'm anxious. We've talked about, like, when are we going to do this? Like, when are we going to?
Oh, we took
Yeah,
the plunge for next September.
We did?
Oh, going to Ireland.
Oh, no,
She
I'm not talking
whispers.
about that. No, I'm talking about.
Good. If you whisper, it's not on the podcast.
The
No one's heard
podcast
it.
people won't hear that we're going to Ireland if I whisper it.
Well,
Doug,
I'm running
say
a half
we're going to
marathon there,
Ireland.
so.
No, I have a bad habit of, she has to remind me of a lot of things. I just show up wherever she says, hey,
I
you
love it. So what's happening in September? What's going down?
Well, 7 years ago, we were supposed to go to Europe for our 25th happy anniversary. And then 2 years ago, and that didn't happen. 2 years ago, we were supposed to go to Europe for our 30th, but then COVID happened. And so I approached Doug at the most inopportune time this summer. I don't know. We were walking around back, and he's stressing about his job and finances and everything. And I'm like, Doug, there's an opportunity for us to go to Ireland and for me to run in the, wait for it, Dingle half marathon.
No jokes will be made.
Oh, there were jokes made. And so I was like, I think we should go because
we've still got the money saved
we
up.
still have all this.
Eating into it.
I know we have the money saved up. And I was like, listen, because when we're in our 70s and you're already gone, I'm going to go by myself.
Wait a second.
I'm going to wish that we had gone together. And that's what he said. Wait a second.
You're killing me off at 70?
I know.
I don't run. I mean, it is
I
true.
know. So, but we're taking that type of plunge, like trusting God with what he has blessed us with.
But it's not us going alone, though. We're going with your whole running community.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a group of people who you run with regularly, where you do training, all these things. And it's been interesting because I've gotten to know the non-running spouses, mostly the other husbands, and that's been a neat way for us to share. Like when we were in New York City for the half marathon,
that was
holy
a 10K.
moly, that day was like 14 below zero. It was brutal. But I had a great conversation with two of the other guys and just talking about life and just talking about stress and work. And the one guy told me just an amazing story about how he had started off doing one thing, had a traumatic brain injury as a consequence of an accident on the job and completely pivoted his whole career. And just, it became a wonderful way to talk about faith and life. Like, how do you get through that? And again, this was all in a context of a small group. Now, it wasn't a church small group, but it was a small community. It was meals together. It was shared experiences, all the things that you're talking about, Josh. So how do we do that? That idea of being together.
The idea of being together around a meal, it's important biblically. You see, it is a practice of ancient Christians. And it's very missional to invite people, like with your group, with that community, to be hospitable around meals with gospel intentionality. Really is a gift to the world, and it's a way to show God's love. Something that you mentioned a couple minutes ago, Doug, the amount of loneliness that was happening, that was on the radar pre-COVID.
Oh, yeah.
So like in health insurance companies were doing surveys on loneliness. Why? Because loneliness is super bad for your health. It's like really, really bad health-wise. And people were incredibly lonely. And giving the gift of presence is just, it's huge. I think, well, I think a lot of things, but everyone watches too much TV. COVID made us weirder and just like how we think about our time. And we got to lean hard to get out of these bad rhythms that the world has pushed us towards. Like open up our life more. And, let's not just be normal, super busy, Doylestown, overscheduled people that don't have time for people.
Well, speaking of schedules and times, I had to pick up my phone here. On November 5th, what's happening November 5th, Josh? Speaking of... No, we don't?
We don't do specific dates on the podcast.
Oh,
sorry.
we don't?
No.
Oh, sorry.
These are more long-lasting,
long shelf life than that.
Good.
It's okay.
It's a men's chili cook-off.
Stuff like chili cook-off is like, hey, it's an event to just let's hang out.
Yeah.
Let's just be together.
Probably about, a little while ago, I wanted to give something like the middle-aged men idea. So it's important to me to say this. Listen, I've got a friend. He realized that in the middle of his career, he had done pretty well with money and everything, but he realized he didn't have friends anymore. He went to this institute called Halftime. It was Halftime Institute, where they basically it was like a secular approach to like what we're talking about right now. It's like, if you don't have friends, you're going to die alone.
Is halftime like halftime of your life kind of thing?
How to make impact with your earnings and, the influence you've gained, but also with friendships and so on, so that, you know, everything that you've done in your career, everything you've built up doesn't just go to waste, that you actually do like philanthropic things that are meaningful, but also to make friendships and have friends. He and his wife changed a bunch of things about their life. One is that they began to throw, literally, more parties than they used to. And we're not talking wild stuff, but we're talking putting themselves out there, inviting neighbors,
Dinner
inviting different
parties.
communities, and having some, chance to meet other grown-ups, other adults. But the thing that really stuck with me was every year he uses a week of his vacation time and goes on some kind of a road trip with a guy or maybe a couple of guys that he hardly knows. He takes a real chance, like really rolls the dice. And so, you know, they're both paying the cost for that. It's a week of vacation they could spend somewhere else. It could go bad. He might not have a great time. It does cost a little money to drive somewhere, you know, but they'll he'll get with a guy and be like, why don't we go to Colorado, climb this mountain? Or why don't we, do this? Let's go fishing in this famous spot up north or whatever it is. This is a serious tip, though, for like middle-aged men, especially when you get to the point that you're empty nest. Maybe you have made it enough in your career that you have a little bit of time you can use and a little bit of money, and it's like things just aren't as tight as they used to be, is roll the dice and take a chance. Not on like...
Invite a couple guys.
Yeah, not on like a 2-hour thing that you can squirm out of, but like commit 5 days where you're going to have to actually like listen to the other person's, soundtrack. And like, you might hate it. You also might make a friend. Little kids are good at this. Hey, I'm so-and-so. Do you want to play with me?
Right.
Like, grown-ups stink at this.
Don't ask.
Yeah.
Hey, so I'm part of a Soul Brothers group. We get together twice a year for like 3.5 days. We've done basically vacations with our wives a few times, but it's been a game changer. We're now into it like 5 years. And I think it was when we're at each other's, this has happened multiple times. When we're at each other's churches and introduce the other guy, you start to cry because you stand up in front of the congregation that you love and you're like, hey, this is what this guy means to me. I might not be here. I might have freaked out, not been in ministry. It's been really, really powerful. But it was a group of guys saying, hey, let's actually go deeper. Let's carve out our time to be in the same place and pray for each other, and we eat and mountain bike, and it's been really life-giving. One of the trips that we did was kind of like that. A guy was like, hey, what if we did a 7-day mountain bike trip? You have to ride your mountain bike 30 miles a day. We'll sleep in these huts with bikes that weigh 60 pounds at elevation. Because the bikes we had like, all our bike parts, water and food for the day, your sleeping bag, some camping stuff. So some guys had to buy bikes. We had to buy all this tent pack, bike camping stuff and train for like 10 months.
You had to train for that?
Yeah, you had to like, hey, we got to be in shape when we show up. You know what I mean? And we did it. We did it the summer of 2021. And I love those guys. I'm excited. I can't wait to have some of those Soul Brothers guys come and speak at Covenant.
That was cool.
I'll cry.
That was cool at your, when we did your installation. See a bunch of guys coming in from the outside.
That was really neat.
Yeah, that was cool. And it was cool to get to know those guys. Would have been great to spend more time, but again, circumstances didn't allow it. But it was just those kinds of networks of people, and kind of just to see how opportunities where I know I need to reach out more and be more comfortable connecting.
Well, it's kind of like when we were young life leaders, it goes back to that phrase that we would say, you have to earn the right to be heard. And in order to do that, you have to build relationships. So you had what was called contact work. Yeah. And you'd go to the plays, you would go to practices, you would go out and get a soda with a kid. You would just start building those relationships, and we were very intentional about it. And I think as we've gotten older, we've gotten lazy about that, about being intentional, because we could be doing contact work right in our own neighborhood.
Right.
And
well, it's just easy to get overwhelmed with your own schedule, and that's, I think you mentioned, it's just you're right, the intentionality.
The intentionality. It's like when we're out walking Max, I know sometimes you get frustrated because I stop and talk to everybody who I see.
He's got to get his miles in.
He needs his steps.
You already got your steps.
But it's funny because I just, like my dad, I like to think that my dad never knew a stranger. He made a friend everywhere he went. And I know that he did that. He was in, I don't think he realized how unintentional he was at making friends. It was just a natural thing. He just did it. And I think that, just doing that, making those relationships, just spending time. Hey, you want to go for a walk? Mm-hmm. Even after church. Hey, you want to just go walk around the campus here and pray for the church? Do a little prayer walk. I don't know. There's just so many simple things to do to build those relationships. So then you're like, okay, you know what? I'm going to roll the dice. We're just going to go away for a weekend. I don't know how it's going to go, but at least I'll have some really great stories to tell either way.
Taking a risk. Mm-hmm. Risk taking is part of love. Extending yourself. I hope. I shared this hope. It's a hope. I shared it this past Sunday. I hope that every person in this church who's a believer in Jesus has a sense of, hey, this is how I'm going to use my gifts this next 6 months. Personally. Hey, this is how I'm going to, in partnership with God, offer myself to the world in the service of love for the glory of God. Here I am, Lord, and that can change the season we're in. There can be reasons to step back from a ministry. Mm-hmm. There can be reasons to hey, I'm going to do something different right now. But I hope people have a sense of, this is my game plan. There's a friend of mine who's a pastor in South Carolina, and every person in the church has basically down on a piece of paper, this is how I'm going to serve the Lord this next 6 months. Which is pretty cool.
Well, and that's actually a great idea to write it down. It's kind of like a New Year's resolution, if you will, which we're all terrible at. It lasts a week. But here's
Do you journal about that kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about that.
It holds me accountable. I also, for me, I sometimes call them, I think I was telling you on Sunday, I call them God whispers. So it's when God is so intentional and so personal with each one of us. He speaks.
You shared this with me, a sense that God wanted you to be doing something.
Yes. He's going to speak to me differently than how he speaks to Doug. But he had been clearly putting on my heart, Hillary, I've blessed you with some of these gifts and you're not sharing them. You're not even sharing them back with me. And so I appreciated how you said on Sunday, some of us have gifts. What are you going to be doing? But what are you going to be doing that nobody else is going to see? Just your Heavenly Father. And so for me, it was, I was classically trained as a pianist, and I hadn't played the piano in a year. And so I just started playing because I was like, okay, God has given me this gift, and I haven't even used it to bless him. So I just started playing, and I didn't know my mom was in the other room, and it made her day. Oh, I feel like we're back in the old house, and I'm cooking dinner. It blessed her, but just it can be something as, what, I like to read. Maybe I'll go visit somebody in the hospital who can't read right now, whose family is away and they've had no visitors. Maybe I'll just go and I'll just sit with them. Maybe I'll just go and I'll just listen to their story. But I think that if you write it down and you actually, because then when you go back, the whole Bible is full of, remember when God did this, remember when God did this, because we're very good at forgetting. And I think that if you write it down, you will have your own, remember when God did this.
So you write down, hey, God answered this prayer. We remember this lesson. And also, it sounds like, do you write down things you're working through? Hey, I'm wondering how to use my gifts. There's a sense that... Oh,
yeah. Because sometimes we can take our gift and really pride ourselves on it, and it becomes about us. And that's where I've struggled with certain gifts. It's like, well, I'm amazing at this. And it's like, yeah, no. And then boom, off the pedestal you go, which, you got to brush yourself off and eat some humble pie. But no, I have this really cool 5-year prayer journal. And so you write the date. It's for every day, but you write the date. So this is my 2nd year. So tonight, when I write in my prayer journal, I'll see what I wrote last year to this day. And it's fun to see how God answered that prayer. Or maybe he hasn't yet. Sometimes it's a no. Sometimes it's a not yet. It's just really cool to see how that goes. So for me, that's what works. I need those reminders.
That's awesome. I love it. That'd be that'd be a good topic on a podcast, devotional journaling, writing down prayers, insights, pouring out your heart before the Lord as a devotional practice. And then remembering. My wife has like stuff on her phone. Hey, these are the things that I prayed for in this season. And then she goes back to it.
Or even I learned a long time ago, and Mary, my friend Mary taught me this too. I now will write down in the morning, I have my coffee with Jesus. Some people call it quiet time. Some people call it devotionals. I call it coffee with Jesus. And I just read scripture, and I'll write down a verse that just sticks out to me. But then I'll either rewrite it in my own words. I'll rewrite it as a prayer, like I did the other Sunday when I read Psalm 139 as a prayer. I'll write it like that. I'll just dig deep and not look at my study notes that's in my Bible. I've encouraged my Bible study ladies to get a Bible that's just the Bible, not a study Bible. Read it for you. Don't see what somebody else said about it.
That's a really ancient practice, actually, what you're doing. Called Lectio Divina.
That's a big word.
Lectio, divine word. It just means reading it. And then a lot of times there'd be repetition in reading, but then dwelling on and meditating on the verse that sticks out and thinking about the meaning of it. What's the application? How would I pray this to the Lord?
Yeah.
All of that. That was like Dietrich Bonhoeffer would basically do that every day and taught.
You like Bonhoeffer.
We could geek out about that. I have a big collection of Bonhoeffer books. But he would do that in the underground seminary. Like, hey, you're going to spend an hour with God and his word and just hear from the Lord every day. I love it. No, it's a good practice. And part of using our gifts as stewards of God's various grace, it's a journey. It's a journey that we're on. And what that looks like now and this season, this next 6 months, it's going to be different, like a couple years from now.
Well, I think one of the things that I've had to work real hard on is I tend to want to think about using my gifts as opposed to actually using my gifts. And it's been weird how this has been both a spiritual thing and a work thing professionally, is that in the doing, I get feedback and input about these gifts or this project that I wouldn't have gotten apart from having done it and failed or succeeded, or in interacting with others, that in the doing, it becomes alive in a strange way. And that then like anything, well, my kids have, they know old phrases I used to use, when they were little. Now they're 28 to 23, but they would want to. Hillary knows what was one of my favorites.
You get very good at what you practice.
Yeah, you get good at what you practice, and so
that's an oracle.
Yes,
that is.
So if you're practicing doing dumb things, you don't want to be good at doing dumb things. You want to be good at doing, and it's in the process of embodying the things that I'm called to as a steward in my gifting. I learn about it, and I get a new perspective and a new direction on it. Of again, how can I be more intentional, attention? Like, all these things are all related, and I find I've had to, because I've been less present, I think, in terms of what are the gifts that God's given me and how am I going to use them. I just kind of have gone into this automatic mode. And we were kind of talking about that earlier. Just if I'm not in auto mode, if I have my intent and my attention on the gifts that God's given me, how do I walk in and, God, I'm about to have breakfast with Fred. Would you help me to listen well? If there are words that you want me to share, help me to share the right words. And if you want me to just keep my mouth shut and listen, help me to do that well too. And then Fred, in the process of these conversations, Fred gives me feedback, and Fred will say things. I'll go, okay, wow, hey, wow, I wasn't careful with what Fred shared with me. That I hurt Fred, or that, or Fred was really encouraged. And how do I get better at building up and encouraging? And how do I do the same thing with all the families who I'm responsible for as an elder? How can I be more intentional that way? And that's a hard one. That's one we're all working on, I think, as elders, to be better at.
Yeah, that's probably a revelation for people to know that I do that throughout my day. Like, praying before this podcast wasn't a throwaway. Try to pray before interactions, think afterwards, give thanks at the end, not just hey, what else do I have to get done today? Not just crank, but be in the presence of God throughout the day, and to be in God's presence so that you're fully present with someone else.
Right.
Is actually a good spiritual rhythm.
Well, because
it's necessary.
In relationships, when the other person is checking the box. Oh, yeah, I totally agree. Right. It's like, I don't feel like you listened to me there. That's something we've worked really hard on, is being, that level of intentionality and presence and avoiding, it's just so easy to be distracted.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, there's so much more to stewardship than, I think when people hear the word steward, I wanted to call the series Steward, but I was afraid that people would just think of money and that's it. And biblically, it's, the concept is all of who we are, offering all of who we are to God in response to the gospel. It's our gifts, it's our presence, our time and energy. It's so much more. So that's one of my prayers as we go through this.
Yeah, there's a radio guy, I loved his line. He'd say, your time, your talent, and your treasure.
Yeah.
Is those 3 T's. And we default to go, I'll just give more money. I need you. I don't need your money. I need you.
No, I want you, because he really doesn't need us.
No,
it's an honor, the fact that he chooses to use us.
It is. God saves us and he sends us. Jesus saves us and he makes us part of who we're doing. We need to feel the weight of that. We need to be like, hey, where's God want to use me? I'm really moved by thinking about, hey, the people of Covenant Church spread out throughout the region. You'll have opportunity to serve people, bless people with your words or deeds of love that no one else will ever see. Some will be secret even to the person who receives it, but it'll be precious to God. Praying silently in your room by yourself with your door closed is really precious to your Heavenly Father. I'm kind of blown away too by the deeds of service that Jesus points us to. It's not usually on the scale of, start nonprofits that make the news. It's the stuff that Jesus inspires people with. If anyone gives a cup of cold water to one of these, because in my name, hey, I tell you the truth, you'll never lose your reward. It's small deeds really matter.
Yeah, you can underline that one with a Sharpie 3 times. Okay.
What, that verse or just that?
No, just this idea that okay, you heard an inspirational sermon. Let's serve. Let's get involved. Let's use our gifts. That doesn't mean that everything needs to be platformed. Not everything needs to be on Facebook. Your service, whatever it was, however small, counts before the Lord if 100 people did not show up. So I think sometimes what happens is everything gets turned into this sensationalized.
Yeah.
We have to launch new ministries. We have to start new programs. And I think your advice there, it was really important, is like put brakes on all of that. Don't launch anything until it's been tested and God has shown you that it's really needed. We sometimes, and I'm guilty of this, try to steward gifts to people that they do not want or need. So there's this discernment involved too, where it's like, just because I feel like you need to hear this from me, or for me to do this for you, doesn't mean that I'm stewarding God's varied graces. I might just be ballooning my own presuppositions and opinions even more. Right? So like, it does help sometimes to ask, like, would you like me to serve this way? Or would this be helpful?
Would this be helpful?
Or just, how can I help? You know, and people will probably give you some feedback, you know, but like when people give feedback and say, hey, that's really helpful, or yeah, I don't know if we should do that again. Like, you know, not to be super wounded about it, but just like, okay, I'm getting guidance. Like, we all need guidance in how to serve. Probably my first idea isn't going to be the greatest idea. And also probably my first idea isn't going to be the one that changes the world.
There's a journey in that too. I think the idea, this is a phrase that's become more popular in recent years, faithful presence.
Yeah.
Let's be faithful presence where we're at. You have to like prove yourself when we win people over. On my old block, I was sort of like unofficial block captain. I mean, cleaned up this empty lot, put a fence around it, planted these 2 willow trees that ended up being like 30 feet high, had other trees planted. And I remember talking to this older gentleman on the block. I'd gotten trash day wrong, you know, July 4th, and you forget, and you just put it out. You forget that there's a holiday. He's like, I seen you put your trash out on the right day. It's probably about the first thing I've seen that you've done right on this block.
Nice.
It was beautiful.
Clearly
like
his gift is words of encouragement.
The first time I've seen you like finally get it together, I was like, thanks, Mr. Kenny. I was like, that's awesome. Hey, that's just serve even with like, it was a good reminder, like serve even when it's like not appreciated at all, or you actually get grief about it. Hey, any parting thoughts? Serve with our gifts as stewards of God's various grace. Thanks. Hey guys, thanks so much for being on the podcast. It was super fun to have you guys.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah. We talked about bees so much. We talked about all kinds of stuff, and I was really grateful for the conversation. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in to the Covenant Table podcast. Until next time.
Josh, you know what to do.
Yeah. Steve's got it.
Just one good solid one.
All right.
It's like the quarterback. Come on, man.
There we go.
Let's get the ball.
Just one. Yeah.
I know. I didn't get the clap that I wanted. That's why I was doing it.
It didn't sound
Yeah, you do have to get a good clap.
That's a good clap.